They sent 8 soldiers through the breach. Only one returned. His name was Sergeant Elias Mercer, 34 years old, born in the Kansas Free Zone, decorated twice for valor. He volunteered for Project Harbinger, the mission that would carry humanity's first direct strike into the Zyrith core worlds. For the last 2 years, the war had reached a tipping point. Earth's defense line was collapsing system by system. Politicians used words like strategic retreat. Soldiers called it what it was: losing. The Zyrith had technology that bent space like origami, weapons that tore through alloy like tissue. Every captured device either self-destructed or corrupted analysis. Project Harbinger's purpose was simple: land deep, extract data, extract samples, get out. A suicide mission with one chance of success. Elias didn't hesitate. Neither did the 7 others who joined him. They were told Earth's survival might depend on what they found. They believed it, every one of them. The operation began in silence. No broadcasts, no press, no ceremonial departures. The jump ship Valkyrie initiated breach pulse from the Orion graveyard, vanishing into the rift without fanfare. It was the first and last time any human craft crossed that boundary. Initial reports were promising. Telemetry confirmed transition. Systems holding, all personnel conscious. Then, 23 minutes into transit, all channels went dark. No signal, no emergency beacon, no fallback protocol. Just silence. 6 days later, Elias Mercer crashed back into Earth's atmosphere in a scorched escape pod, wrapped in blackout shielding. The impact crater spanned 20 meters. Retrieval crews found him slumped against the wall, alive, gaunt, covered in radiation burns, and completely mute. He refused debriefing, refused to eat unless left alone. No signs of head trauma, no neurological issues. He blinked, breathed, bled like any man, but he said nothing. Military intelligence assumed he was in shock. Trauma protocol teams cycled through him. Psychologists, interrogators, priests. He looked at them all the same way, like someone who had stared into something they weren't meant to understand and came back unwhole. No answers, no data, no mention of the others. Just one man, breathing, as the war outside continued to devour planets. They had names, the others: Captain Halloway, tactical lead; Lieutenant Zhao, navigation; Corporal Dries, demolitions. They weren't numbers. They had families, records, lives. Elias gave nothing, not even their final moments. Some whispered he had turned coward, that maybe he'd killed them, that he'd broken in the moment of decision and abandoned the mission. High command didn't care for rumors. They wanted results. And so far, this man, the sole survivor of humanity's boldest mission, had given them nothing. But it wasn't grief in his eyes. It wasn't guilt. Not entirely. It was something colder, measured, not numb, not mad. Something far more disturbing. It was as though he decided something. Like the truth had become a burden he would not let loose into the world. Security footage showed him sitting for hours, unmoving, barely blinking. Nurses reported strange behaviors, drawing symbols into the sheets with his fingers, mouthing words with no sound. None of it meant anything to the experts. Patterns, they said, grief-induced disassociation. But when they tried to sedate him, he resisted. And when they tried to isolate him further, he laughed. The laugh was dry, cracked from dehydration, but unmistakable. A sound that echoed like something from a trench too deep to reach. One nurse said it best. It wasn't madness. It was like he finally understood something we don't. And still, not a word. Behind closed doors, command debated options. A tribunal. A chemical truth extraction. Even memory scraping. All denied for now. Public sentiment clung to the image of him as a hero. A returned soldier, bearer of knowledge. Whatever lay behind his silence. The world still believed he had brought something with him. They weren't wrong, because the scans of the escape pod revealed anomalies. Alloy structures not from any known human or Zyrith design. The hull had fused with material that didn't respond to molecular probing. Its internal layout had shifted during re-entry, defying physics. And more unsettling still, There was no record of Elias's genetic profile, matching return capsule's recorded biometric lock. In short, something or someone overrode its systems to send him home. They asked him about this. Of course they did. And this time he moved. He stood, walked to the reinforced glass between him and the observer, and placed his hand against it. Not in defiance, not in desperation, in warning. That night, a black site medical team relocated him. Off-grid, no announcements, no trails. Officially, Sergeant Elias Mercer was placed under enhanced observation for recovery. Unofficially, the world lost track of him. And still, the war dragged on. Colonies went silent. Supply lines collapsed. And behind it all, the question haunted command. What did he see? What could make a man like Elias Mercer, by all accounts a loyal, brave, and clear-minded soldier, return and choose silence over salvation? It wasn't madness. It wasn't cowardice. It was choice. And like all choices, it pointed to something he knew, something worse than losing, something he refused to unleash. He had gone to the edge of known space. He had entered the home of the enemy. He had seen something. And when faced with the decision of whether or not to bring that knowledge back, he said no without saying a word. The transport plane landed without lights. The building it delivered to had no name. Concrete, steel, buried beneath mountain and protocol. They took Elias Mercer through 3 security checkpoints, each with biometric scans that failed twice before clearing him. The machines didn't recognize the man who had come back. Not fully. Inside, everything was clinical. White light, quiet hums, no windows. Observation teams rotated every 6 hours. He didn't speak to any of them, barely acknowledged their presence. He sat when asked, ate when food was left, slept when the room went dark. It was as if he had accepted a sentence without a trial. The first to attempt contact was Dr. Arlen Mears, former field psychologist for the Titan campaign, decorated for resilience training, trusted by brass. He spent 40 minutes introducing himself, laying groundwork, establishing routine. Elias didn't blink. Dr. Mears tried audio stimuli, flashcards, memory triggers, images of the Valkyrie crew. Nothing. Then he placed a photo of Earth, taken from orbit, in front of him. Elias stared, and a tear rolled down his face. One. No sound. No movement. Just that. The silence spoke more than any scream. Word of the moment spread quickly. Analysts reviewed the footage. Was it recognition? Regret? A message? Within a week, high-level meetings were back in session. Pressure mounted. Every general, strategist, and council member wanted the same thing. Answers. Earth's defense grid had shrunk. The Xyrath had overtaken 3 more systems. Their advance wasn't slowing. Humanity was bleeding time. They needed the intelligence Mercer had refused to give. Some wanted to break him. Others wanted to bribe. But all agreed on one thing. This wasn't ordinary trauma. This was deliberate, calculated. The question wasn't why he couldn't speak. It was why he wouldn't. They called in specialists, interrogators with psychological training. Measured pressure, no violence. Hours of silence followed every prompt. One interrogator tried a direct approach. Your silence is costing lives. Mercer looked up for the first time that day. His lips moved. One word. No. They replayed the footage dozens of times. Analysts dissected tone, posture, tension. The refusal wasn't casual. It was final, like he was speaking not to them, but to something larger, like he had already made peace with his choice. The media, of course, knew nothing. Officially, Mercer was in medical isolation for radiation treatment. Unofficially, rumors trickled out through hangar techs, janitors, distant relatives. The press began to circle like vultures. Hero returned silent. Was Harbinger a lie? Did we lose more than we gained? Public opinion fractured. Some viewed him as broken, others as a prophet. A few claimed he'd been replaced, an alien clone meant to sabotage from within. The conspiracy sphere lit up like wildfire. Footage of his landing site was dissected frame by frame. Every silence, Every still image became a message people wanted to decode. But none of it mattered to Elias. He sat in the same posture, slept on the same side of the bed, refused medication unless left alone. He spoke no further. He asked for nothing. He became an empty vessel into which the world poured meaning. Privately, Earth Command was panicking. If Elias had encountered Xyrath's inner defense protocols, or worse, evidence of an internal schism or superweapon, they needed that data. Lives depended on it. If he had failed the mission, they needed to know how. If he'd been turned, they needed proof. But they had nothing. No data packet. No black box. The escape pod's AI core had been wiped clean, deliberately. The systems were operational but dormant, with root-level erasure in a language no one recognized. One scientist said it felt less like a system crash and more like a decision. Something deleted itself, not to protect secrets, but to prevent understanding. There were no mistakes. Everything was too precise. Back in the observation chamber, Mercer began to exhibit new behavior. On his meal trays, he started arranging food items in geometric patterns, circles within squares, triangles connected at impossible angles. A linguist reviewed the footage and noticed repetition. It wasn't just shapes. It was a code. They gave him a tablet to write. He pushed it aside. They tried pencil and paper. He tore them in half. Eventually, they gave him nothing. And that's when he began using his fingernail, scratching symbols into the underside of the metal bunk. When the guards cleaned it, he simply scratched them again the next night. The same sequence. Over and over, they brought in pattern analysts, cryptographers, even theologians. No match, until one young analyst flagged it as a potential variant of a Xyrath glyph, a religious one, a single word, mercy. The discovery sent shockwaves up the chain. Was it a message? A threat? A warning? No one could say, but it broke the rhythm. For the first time, someone inside the system began to ask a forbidden question. What if he wasn't hiding something awful? What if he was protecting us from something worse? Some suggested releasing him publicly, letting him speak to the people. Maybe he'd open up. The proposal died in committee. Instead, new containment orders arrived. Higher clearance, fewer staff, more surveillance. If Mercer had made a choice, then Earth's command structure had made one too. They would not allow him to influence the outside world. The irony didn't go unnoticed by the few who still believed in his integrity. A soldier returns, refuses to share, shows mercy, and so we cage him, afraid of what he won't say. Some called it safety, others fear. But Elias Mercer never resisted, never complained, never asked for freedom. He sat alone, the last survivor of humanity's boldest mission. A man who had traveled into the enemy's core, witnessed something beyond understanding, and returned not with weapons or warnings, but with silence. Not because he was broken, because he had made a decision. And somehow, that made him more terrifying than anything the Xyrath had ever done. The world hadn't forgotten him. Not entirely. Whispers moved through networks, encrypted forums, black market news feeds. Footage of Elias Mercer, grainy, distorted, weeks old, still circulated. A man in a gray jumpsuit with a stare like frost. No words, no answers, but everyone knew his face. Outside the military walls, he had become a symbol. To some, he was a martyr, proof of sacrifice beyond comprehension. To others, a traitor, a man who abandoned his mission, his crew, and his duty. And to a smaller, growing number, he was something else entirely, a man who had seen. They called him the returner, the silent witness, the man who refused the war. It was only a matter of time before the public hunger for truth reached someone who wasn't bound by clearance or command, someone willing to go off-grid, someone who didn't believe in official narratives. Her name was Lena Rourke, former war correspondent, independent, known for breaking the Mars Syndicate leak. She had seen what war did to soldiers, what it made them become, and more importantly, what it took from them. She didn't come with a camera crew or a press badge, just a quiet message, routed through a chain of favors, to the one person in military intelligence who still had doubts. The reply came 2 days later. A room, No guards. 20 minutes. When Lena entered, Elias Mercer was already seated, hands folded, gaze locked on the far wall. She didn't speak at first. She didn't try to force anything. She simply sat. 9 minutes passed. Then she placed something on the table between them. A child's drawing. Crayons. A stick figure holding hands with 7 others. Each labeled with a name. Holloway, Zhao, Dries, Mercer. They weren't forgotten, she said. At least not by all of us. His eyes shifted. The first movement in days. She continued. Quiet. I don't want your secrets. I just want to understand. Not what happened, but why you won't talk about it. He didn't blink, but he didn't look away. So she came again. 3 visits turned into 5. She brought sketches, music, poems left on the net by soldiers in the outer colonies, memories frozen in data, humanity's breadcrumbs. Elias never spoke. But on the 6th visit, he did something else. He picked up a pencil. He didn't write. He didn't draw the symbol from before. He drew something different. A curve, a spiral, a half sphere suspended above lines that bent away from it. She scanned it later, ran it through archives, cultural records, ship schematics. It matched nothing, except one entry, buried in a Zyrith codex, translated decades ago by fringe linguists. The symbol meant compassion offered in defiance. It wasn't a warning. It was a statement. She returned the next day with no words. Just that glyph, printed in dozens of variations. Handwritten, carved, printed. When she placed them on the table, Elias looked at each one, then added a small mark to the corner of one, a confirmation. Something had changed. She recorded her notes. Privately. No network uploads. No cloud trace. She didn't want clicks. She wanted truth. What she found, buried beneath layers of silence, was something far more human than any war report. This wasn't about a failed mission. This was about a choice that broke protocol. A line crossed not with violence, but restraint. In the data fragments from a Valkyrie's escape pod, there was a single corrupted image file, unrecoverable by official means, but a third-party decryption tool, one Rourke had used during the Europa Black Site scandal, pulled something faint, the edge of a Zyrith structure, organic geometry, fractal curves, and in the center, blurry but undeniable, 2 human figures kneeling beside something slumped. Not dead, just still. She stared at that image for hours. 2 humans, surrounded by alien terrain, kneeling over what looked like a wounded Zyrith. She didn't need an expert to tell her what it meant. Someone in the Valkyrie team had shown mercy, and only one had returned. She brought the image to Mercer. Didn't say a word, just slid it forward. He stared. Slowly, carefully, he reached out and turned the image upside down, then pushed it back. Not rejection, correction. She understood. The image wasn't about the act. It was about the perspective. We were looking at it wrong. That night, Rourke didn't sleep. She replayed every note, every silence, every expression. She didn't see trauma. She saw restraint. She saw guilt, not for failing to complete a mission, but for knowing that completing it would have cost something more important. Humanity. She drafted a report, not for broadcast, for history. Subject, Elias Mercer, Behavioral Analysis Summary. Conclusion, subject experienced moral divergence from primary objective. Exposure to non-hostile Zyrith behavior altered mission alignment. Chose empathy over extraction. Chose silence over manipulation. Maintained silence not as a refusal, but as protection, not of himself. Of us. She never submitted it. Some truths, she decided, were meant to be found, not forced. Still rumors spread, not from her, but from others. Words like mercy, refusal, compassion. Witness began appearing in graffiti, in forums, in whispered conversations among young recruits. Something was shifting. People didn't know what he had done, but they began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, the greatest act of war was to choose not to fight. Inside his room, Elias began drawing more symbols. None matched anything known, but all of them shared one trait. They connected, lines crossing boundaries. arcs bridging divides. Every glyph was part of something larger, something no one yet understood. But one thing had become clear. Elias Mercer wasn't trying to forget. He was trying to remind us of something we were about to lose. And someone had finally started listening. It started quietly. A report from the frontier, buried in routine updates. A Zyra vessel entering Terran space, unarmed, broadcasting a signal. Not words, not threats. A symbol, a spiral intersecting with a curved arc. The same glyph Elias Mercer had drawn months before. Command scrambled, defense systems locked in, but the ship did nothing aggressive. No scans, no shield disruptions. It simply drifted in place, holding position at the edge of the Kepler perimeter as if waiting. Every analyst speculated differently. A trick, a surrender, a negotiation. But only one person recognized what it really was. A reply. Rourke saw the footage on a secure feed 2 days after the encounter. She requested access to Elias. Denied. She tried again. Refused. She sent a message to his handler. You've had a man who speaks in symbols. The universe just answered one. Let him see it. They folded faster than expected. Mercer was shown the transmission in a sealed room. No guards. No observers. Just him, a screen and a chair. He leaned forward the moment the symbol flickered on the projection. And for the first time since his return, he smiled. No one spoke about that moment. But within 24 hours, he was gone. No press. No file trail. The room was cleared and the facility listed as decommissioned. Officially, Elias Mercer died during an off-site medical transfer. Unofficially, he was taken to the edge of Terran space, where the waiting Zyra vessel still hovered, silent and patient. They didn't open fire. They didn't power shields. And when a small escort shuttle carried Elias toward the ship, the Zyra vessel simply opened a corridor. He stepped inside. Alone, the door closed, and then the ship vanished into slip space without so much as a pulse. No pursuit orders were issued, because by then, someone at the highest levels had begun to understand. We weren't being invaded anymore. We were being asked a question, and Elias Mercer was our answer. What happened next wasn't a treaty. Not officially. No signatures. No councils. Just silence. The Zyra stopped advancing. They didn't retreat. Didn't send envoys. They just paused. A year passed. Humanity rebuilt. Scarred worlds slowly recovered. Command maintained a state of readiness. But some of the more aggressive voices were replaced. Quieter ones rose. And throughout all of it, Elias Mercer remained missing. Not captured. Not classified. Just gone. But his absence was not empty, because something began to ripple across human space. Symbols, drawn on hangar walls, carved into metal, etched into armor, not just a spiral. New ones, arcs and lines, connections and bridges. The same design language Mercer had begun before he vanished. No one claimed responsibility. No one organized a movement. But it grew. Young soldiers took to marking their gear with the glyphs. Technicians painted them on doors. Medics wore them like wards. They weren't about peace. They weren't even about hope. They were a reminder that there's a line between winning and surviving, and that someone, one man, had crossed that line, looked back, and chosen not to drag the rest of us with him. Rourke released a report anonymously. It didn't reveal military secrets. It didn't claim inside access. It told a story of a man who went where no human had gone, who encountered something greater than war, and chose silence not to withhold knowledge, but to protect the future from what that knowledge could cost. It didn't go viral. It didn't trend, but it stuck. People read it. Quietly, privately, and some began to understand what humanity almost became. What Elias had refused to let happen. He wasn't a hero because he survived. He was a hero because he came back with the power to break us, and refused to use it, because he saw that the most dangerous victory is one that erases your soul. Years passed. The war never resumed. It didn't end either. The border remained quiet, like two civilizations standing at the edge of a conversation. Neither quite knew how to begin. But no more colonies fell. No more death fleets. No more breach alarms. Just silence. Not absence. Balance. The Valkyrie team was posthumously honored. Each of their families received memorials. But the wording was different this time. Not fallen in duty. Not sacrifice in combat. Just one phrase, engraved in every stone. They reach beyond war. No one knows where Elias Mercer is now. Some believe he lives among the Zyrith, an emissary in silence. Others think he's dead, offering his final breath as a message of restraint. But those who watched closely, those who traced the patterns, who followed the symbols, knew better. He wasn't gone. He was still teaching. Because every time a soldier hesitates before pulling the trigger, every time a fleet commander chooses dialogue over detonation, every time someone looks at the enemy and sees something more than a target, that's Mercer. That's his voice. Quiet, steady, unyielding. A whisper across the stars saying, "You don't have to become what you're fighting." And somehow, that message did what weapons never could. It held the line, not through fear, but through choice. One man, one silence. That changed everything.